Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. I'm so excited to have Gary Smith joining us today. He is VP Executive Managing Sales Director at KnowledgeLake, and Konstantin Echt, Senior Solutions Engineer, also here at KnowledgeLake. Thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to be talking about the silver tsunami, which brings workforce challenges to local governments. Some counties are facing the tough task of maintaining service levels, while in some cases, losing experienced workers. So today, we're going to explore how KnowledgeLake's AI-powered synthetic labor can help local agencies handle these challenges by processing data, making decisions, and in some cases, even leading projects. But before we begin, a few housekeeping items. This webinar will be recorded and available for later viewing on demand. We also encourage your participation, so please put in your questions at any moment. There's a section for questions underneath the screen where you see the slides shortly, and we will get to those in the Q&A section. And with that, I will pass it over to Gary.
Thank you, Pam, and welcome everyone. We're glad you're able to spend a little bit of time with us today. Good morning, good afternoon to you, wherever you might be. I think what I'll do here is bring up our slides and start off by a few prefacing comments about the nice lead-in that Pam had crafted for us. If you think about it, there is an existential crisis, I think, for government work, as many of you probably are no doubt living through, whether it's at the state level, the county level, the town level. It ripples through and has the same impact. Pam mentioned the silver tsunami, and it's characteristically, it is the tribal knowledge, right? That retirement of that older generation that had so much of the tribal knowledge around the processes and the workflows and just in general, the accomplishment of the work order that is retiring out of the force at a large rate. The baby boomers were a huge generation. On top of that, you get other compounding factors, right? There's varying fluctuations of hiring freezes. I was at a large state event yesterday where the discussion was around the hiring freezes, and a lot of times qualified people are actually being interviewed, and these are people that they would like to hire this particular state, and a hiring freeze comes up for 6 months, 9 months, whatever it might be. And if it's not a post that's deemed critical, it goes on hold. So there's a loss of the types of talent that can get drawn in from time to time, further compounding the problem. And of course, as we're all very well aware, there's a theme that's been around for some time now about smaller government, right? Which means reduced funding. The old saying of doing more with less, that's great, but who's left holding the bag to do the more? And you'll see that we look at that in a very different perspective to solve for that challenge. The other notion is there's kind of a multi-dimensional front that's occurring within many government agencies, and that is not just the work and the workforce that's retiring and getting the people in that are needed to backfill these roles, but there's a transition in many counties and in many towns and even in some states, transitioning out of microfilm and paper into the digital era. And not just on an agency by agency level, but really more uniformly across the broader construct. And of course, it goes without saying that this is all really in an effort to create a much better taxpayer experience. Again, drawing on the event that I was at yesterday, it was quite interesting to hear how across the silos of different work, there is a deep recognition that there is a thread almost along every single agency that impacts each one of their taxpayers. The challenge has become how do we smooth it out so that there's no logging onto one site and then going to another one for a different department. It's just one smooth, seamless interaction for the taxpayer that creates a really rewarding user experience. So if you think about it, we actually, in the past, we have taken a run at it. And more recently, Many of you may be very familiar with the term RPA, robotic process automation. That was kind of the first generation of automation. That was good at doing certain things. And that's ironically not what we're talking about here. We've moved a generation beyond that. And I'll get a little deeper into this in a moment, but effectively, if you look at what RPA was trying to do to solve for the problem, it was really almost like the integration or the glue, if you will, between varieties of systems, right? So a user logging on to one system and doing what we called swivel chair work, back maybe a decade ago, where you might be in one system, you turn to another computer, you go into another system, you get an answer, and you put it all together. And it has had a very good effect and impact on operationally on how organizations can eliminate a lot of that. What we're going to describe to you today is a generation well beyond that incorporates multiple different elements that RPA and the advent of that original generation of automation just kind of missed, right? This is actual work. And the way that we view it is it's a second source of labor, right? So unlike perhaps a just an automation that can do very, very specific things, what we're describing is something that's building out an end-to-end capability. And so to that end, in fact, we just recently had a press release come out about synthetic labor. This is a term that we've developed as an organization because it truly represents a source of labor for a second labor pool that is intended to work hand in glove with humans, or maybe hand in glove, maybe not the right term because there's no physical body for a synthetic laborer. Maybe it's more accurately said, maybe an RJ jack connector or a Wi-Fi connector into hand. But all of that really boils down to a couple of core things that we're bringing to the efforts around making the work in any government agency at any level much more efficient. In many cases, we are finding across the breadth of our clients that we are their first meaningful win in AI. And I don't mean that in the sense that it's an AI-based chat bot or it's an AI helper where you can utilize ChatGPT perhaps to ask questions and do some research. That's certainly some component of it, but this is actually the recognition that one of the killer use cases for AI happens to be work, typically office work that humans have been doing. It allows a whole host of different things. It allows the humans that are in the organization to move up the value chain, so they are providing a much greater return on what they do. It's also more rewarding work, it turns out, for them because it's a lot less of the underpinning work or the grunt work that has to get done in pulling together reports and reading a document, for example, to get certain fields out of it. The other element of us that really surrounds our basis is that we are a mechanism to incorporate not just the structured data that you have from a variety of systems that you've accumulated over the years, but it's the unstructured data coming out of things like email, it's images. We've got clients that use pictures of notebooks. We can read the handwriting and bring that in. So it's truly it's encompassing the entire breadth of the organizational data so that you have a comprehensive picture as opposed to only those sources that come from structured data. Of course, underpinning our capability in this synthetic labor force that's really important is native workflow, right? And that's really important because what this is allowing the synthetic laborer to do is it may be weaving in and out at various points of working with getting something from a human or handing something off to a human or having a human do a quality control check or doing something that humans do so very well that synthetic labor really maybe isn't that capable of doing. But in any case, it's orchestrating that entire choreography that goes on in that work stream along with its associated data, right? So that's a really, really important component to all this. And then, of course, as I've been saying to you, the synthetic labor source is a much more efficient, reliable, and less costly second pool of workers to join the human labor source that comprises much of your organization. Across the board, we've got some very good experiences in working across a variety of different levels of government. Certainly at the state level with the state of Rhode Island, state of Tennessee, state of Kentucky, a number of large cities, Houston certainly. We've done work within San Francisco, within the San Francisco Municipal Transportation. So we've got a lot of experience in this and a great depth in which to offer up a lot of the knowledge and the capability set that your particular agency may be looking for. And when I look at that largely, what does that boil down to, or how does that actually come into play? Well, we help government agencies do a number of things. It's certainly acceleration of public service delivery through the synthetic labor pool, right? This streamlines all those repetitive manual tasks that we talked about that really make work, I think, it can make it a drudge, right? It's essential tasks that are core to everything that needs to be done, but it's not the stuff humans love to do. Humans like to do things like solve problems, create and invent new ideas, right? There's a whole host of things that intelligent human set of capabilities, you want to maximize that in the working hours during the day. This frees up to do that. It also does things like, because it redefines a lot of the work elements that a human does, it allows a transition of the work in such a way that the job becomes a lot more of a ratio of accomplishment. And so what you're doing is you're actually breaking off the work of the lower value work that you may not want humans doing anyway, because it might be mistake prone data entry or reading for a lot of values through documents and then transcribing those. These are things that typically become highly weakened areas of mistakes, right? And so eliminating those errors becomes a critical piece of it. And again, you'll see in just a few moments here through my colleague Konstantin Echt, he'll take you through what an easy workflow looks like, right? This has been engineered from the ground up. We designed ourselves about 5.5 years ago as a cloud native, highly modern architecture that is intended for non-technical users. So that has a couple of different meaningful impacts. First of all, it means someone with a background that doesn't have anything to do with coding or technology can actually use this. And you'll see how that rolls out when Konstantin shows you the demo. But the other part of this is too, it takes off a dependence on IT and getting on their project schedule, but it also makes their world a lot better, because if a lot of this can be hived off in a manner that they're not necessarily having to support it, it makes it a lot more cost effective for their operation as well. And then, of course, the last arena is really the modernization of legacy systems, right? Many states, counties, townships, they are still utilizing document stores that are not digitized, right? Or they're reliant on microfilm as backup. As you work through this, one of the nice things about our environment is it's taking in all those documents, it's digitizing, right? As if you're using it to scan things in, and it's stored up in a very safe, hardened cloud environment that is effectively a walled garden for your particular state, county, municipality, whatever it may be. So a lot of the things that might be worrisome are eliminated, right? We partner up with Microsoft, as I mentioned. There are others, so very much a representation of how seriously we take the security, how seriously we take the modernization initiatives in the context of work, because really these older systems came about to help humans work, so it's all tied together in that manner. So with that, I would like to transition over to Konstantin Echt. Konstantin, if you would kindly take over,
You got it.
you can take everyone through our lovely demo.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Gary. I appreciate that. So my goal for today for you folks is to kind of walk you through the process of as document or data hits your environment, how it's captured, how it's processed, how it's retrieved afterwards. Primarily focused on the ease of use from the end user experience associated with it. And as Gary mentioned, I will delve a little bit into the workflow just to show some of the functionality of it, the drag and drop functionality, and how easily you can restructure as opposed to having to put in an IT request and waiting a couple of months because it's a complicated task. So I do encourage you folks as I go through it, please paste any questions you have into the chat window. We'll be sure to answer them towards the end. So really what I want to start with is the ingestion of content. So our goal here is to minimize change management and say, if as a county, a state, or a division within the county, as you're receiving documents or creating them through whatever means or method you're currently receiving them, we want to be able to insert ourselves at that point so that users don't have to learn new things or start changing their processes. So that could be as simple as our scan app. So our scan app will drive your scanners that are attached to the desktops. You can scan from there, and that captures the content as it goes through. If documents are already digitized, you can just drag and drop into the upload app. It'll start the workflow process from there as well. If you're leveraging something like a multifunction device that releases to a, let's say, network folder, we can set up an import job to monitor set folders and bring that content in. So it doesn't matter to us if you're using Rico or Xerox or Sharp or anything else. We're trying to be agnostic to those portions. And we also have a very deep-rooted relationship with Microsoft. So if you're leveraging things like Word or Excel, we're able to have add-ins that work with those things. So as you're creating documentation, we can capture that, or as in you're receiving emails, we're able to capture those as well. So there's a couple of things here that we could do for you. One is if you have, let's say, an unattended inbox where you're getting invoices or applications or vendor agreements or anything else of the sort, we can monitor that particular inbox on whatever cadence makes sense for you folks, bring in those emails and automatically start processing them. Or if you need more of an ad hoc way of saying, look, I want to pick and choose which emails get ingested, we have add-ins into Outlook as well, whether it's the web version or the on-prem version, and you can make a decision on what's important to you as a user. Is it the email as a whole? Is it just the attachment? This once again connects to your backend repository and allows us to ingest these documents. Let's say I want to send this to my invoicing process, and right there it's off to the races. It's going to hit a backend process that will do the classification, the extraction, and route it to my repository without hopefully a user ever getting involved. One of the things that I want to also mention is that uh, not all workflows start with a document. So perhaps on your website, you have a form that needs to be filled out by a constituent or a vendor or somebody else to start some sort of a process. And typically they will fill something out, or there'll be a link to a fillable PDF. They'll process that. Somebody has to review it and start sending emails back and forth. Whereas what we're able to do is create as part of our workflow is a trigger. So this trigger, I'm opening it inside of KnowledgeLake. It could be pasted to your website as well. And what this will allow us to do is use all the information that the user provides and start the workflow automatically. So behind the scenes, based on the information that I provided, I'm going to get an email to say, either if it's the first time registered here or log in here, go through this process. And it's meant to mimic what a user would typically see. So if they're going to your website to fill something out, then we would try to mimic the actual portal they're going to interact with to look exactly like, or as close as possible with the color schemes like the environment that you have available to you. So let me come here. So I received an email, has my information populated because I plugged it into the form, has a link for me, right? So I can click on that link, and it takes me over to a portal. So this is meant to be very, very much self-serviceable. So if it's my first time, I can register. I've registered before, so I'll just sign in. All of this is not putting any strain on your IT environment. Every time somebody logs in, they always get a one-time code being sent over to whatever email they registered with. If they forget their password, they can reset it also without getting your folks involved. And this is all hosted on the backend resources that is not run by your organization, so you don't have to worry about maintaining those resources to spin up another portal or anything of the sort. So I'll go in here. Here is my one-time code. I'll plug it in, and here I have my task available to me. So in this case, it was a vendor onboarding task, because I'm trying to submit an application to work with the division. So it says, here you go, please upload your driver's license, your W-9, certificate of incorporation, certificate of good standing, and I can go through and select the documents that I want to upload. They'll show up in here, and if I was to fill all of these out, I can press complete and then move it on to the next step in the process, and it gets folks internally involved, right? So all this to say, um, traditionally would be a request comes in, somebody has to then reach out to those folks, ask for documentation, and there's a bunch of emails flying back and forth. We hope to minimize all of that by having an automated process. And then as a user, constituent, as a vendor, I can always log back in and see where am I in the process. So here's my task available for me. Here's where I currently am in the process. And as things happen either by me or by the government agency, this will progress along the steps so that from a visibility point of view, instead of constantly contacting your office and asking, well, what's going on? Where am I? I submitted this request a week ago. I can always log in and take a look at where I am in the process. All of that is to say we can ingest this content really from anywhere. Now, what happens afterwards is it will flow through a particular workflow. So the workflow could be something very simple where it hits an AI step. It allows for the ability to stop for validation to make sure that all rules are abided by, convert to PDF, searchable PDF in this case, and upload to my destination. I can have alternate routes and say, with certain types of documents, I don't want to be converted to searchable PDF. I want them to be TIFF images or image-only PDFs. So I'll create a secondary route that's just based on different variables, right? So if my doc type, well, if I could spell better, it would work even better. But if my doc type is equal to something else, then I can reference it in here and say if it's equal to HR document, then go down this other road or this other pass, and then I'll just simply a UI of saying, okay, if it goes through here, configure it as an image-only PDF. If it comes through here, configure it as a searchable PDF and make sure that make it a PDFA so it's archivable for the future. Right, so I can quickly configure my workflow as easily as possible with as minimal effort, right? So it's one of those low code, no code situations where, yes, we do have extensibility for more complex workflows, but to have alternate routes and things loop around and make decisions on, all that could be easily built out without having to get heavy IT presence.
Yeah, and Constantine, if I can maybe add to that, I think this is what we were referencing earlier. This can get as convoluted as a process as any process is, right? There may be moments where this is streaming in and out with human interaction for validation, as Constantine was pointing out in his example. So very much it is a representation of, or a codification, if you will, of the workflow of a given process or task.
Yep, absolutely. But back to the user experience. So as we mentioned, the ideal situation is documents come in, we classify, we extract, it goes to your repository, and the user never gets involved. As great as that sounds, I think we can all agree that's probably not going to be realistic for every document every single time. So for that, we have the index app here, which really more is a validation queue. So if my role in the organization is to say, as documents come in, I want to be able to validate all of them or some of them, I have my index queue that allows me to do just that, where here I have visibility into multiple workflows, and I could just press begin indexing to open the first one in line. Once I clear it out, it's done, moves on to the next one. Or if I know, well, you know what, actually my legal department, if I have documents coming through that need validation, those should really be handled first. So I can pick and choose to say, I want to go ahead and validate this particular document. So this batch that you're seeing here with these 5 documents, it already ran through our AI process. And what this allowed it to do is it understood that these are legal documents. And then based on the way that I designed my taxonomy, meaning what fields are relevant for each content type or doc type, um, I said for legal documents, I want you to figure out what the document type is, what is the case number, the plaintiff, defendant, the date, and provide a summary of the document for me because I don't have time to read through all of it, or I want you to simplify it for me. So as I go through these documents, you could see that without me having to really do any work on my end, it's able to extract those values where available and provide a summary of what's in this particular legal document. And then I could simply review, or if, for example, date was a required field, then I could stop here to manually populate the date and move on from there. So as long as values are being populated, I can review those, I can see them. And for anything that's not populated, I can make that decision. So here we can see the date is actually not listed. It's not a real document. So I can go ahead and modify this or have a flag that says if it's not a valid date, stop it as an exemption and go on from there. And it works great with those documents that aren't necessarily structured. It works even better for documents that are structured or semi-structured, to where maybe the labels will change, but it's the same idea, look and feel most of the time. So here I have a batch of HR documents, same idea. It's grabbing some information on its own. It's going through it, understanding the information, and providing me back the values that I'm asking for. In the last case, or in this case, there's some machine print, there's some handwriting as well that gets automatically extracted from here to go through it and populate those values. So all of these documents that you're seeing realistically for the information that we're asking for, if this was a production environment, these documents could have gone straight through without a user ever having to get involved to populate these values. And really the last thing I want to show from an extraction point of view is, one of the things that we've seen quite often is there's a large back file of documents that have been in their filing cabinets or somewhere else for, tens, dozens, sometimes hundreds of years, that's the only remaining record of those documents. And maybe you don't care about all the metadata values, but you just want to be able to preserve them and have an understanding of unlocking what's in those actual documents. So what we're able to do is, as those documents get ingested, and that could be an overhang scanner, picture scanner, we're able to read these documents, extract the text from them, so that later on, if you want to search for key terms or information, you have a more or less, not an exact transcript, right? Because this is obviously, this particular document's from 1844. But as you can see, it still does a really good job of being able to read the handwriting on here, populate the values. So at least it unlocks some of the potential of what's in these things. So if ever I want to go back and say, find me documents that reference George Washington, I can get a hit on it and see the documents that were involved in that process. And I think all of this is fantastic, but at the end of the day, we've held some counties and government agencies that their main focus wasn't even what we spoke about. It was purely that they were starting to create this digital junk drawer in their environments where it was already digitized, but they had a really hard time in being able to find documents when they needed them. So for that, we have the search app. And obviously the ingestion that we spoke about and the extraction does play a big part of that, because if we can put meaningful data, some metadata around it, it makes it easier to find later on. But also we want to make sure that if you're, as a user, you're in here doing validation or scanning or anything else, you don't have to then go somewhere else and learn some other technology to be able to find the document. So your documents could be stored in your GovCloud, SharePoint Online environment, or Azure GovCloud. However, we have connectivity into those environments. So you can reference the search app here. I'll go to my HR search, which all of this is permission driven. So from a user point of view, you'll only see what you have access to. And even if you have access to a saved search, your search results will be limited to what you have permissions to actually bring back. So I'm going to type in the last name Ackerman, run the search. This looks, in my case, into my SharePoint Online environment and brings me back across multiple libraries, the 17 documents that I have with the metadata value of Ackerman. So I can go ahead through it and pick the documents that are relevant for me. But the other thing that think it's important to note is we have folks that maybe they're not doing scanning. All they care about is the retrieval part of it. And they're currently working in HubSpot or Salesforce or really any of these third-party tools that they already have licensing for. So for that, what we have is the ability to connect and integrate with any of these lines of business applications. So what we're able to do is recognize when an application is open. As I maneuver through it and click through different screens, we get a contextual understanding of what is on these particular screens and documents and be able to access the information related to it with the push of a button. So if I'm on this screen and I want to find documents related to Pilar Ackerman, I can run a search based on this. If my documents are still stored, in my case, in SharePoint, I have a button here that pops up when it recognizes the status of this screen. So I can come here, click on employee search. In my case, I dropped in her employee number into the title field. So it extracts that value, takes me to my saved search, and with touch of a button, I have my documents visible to me, and I can go through and review them directly from here. So the beauty of this is that from a compliance point of view, I don't have multiple versions of documents floating around. I have one centralized repository, but I have one touch access to it from any application that I need. And then I can go into it, open it up. As you can see here, it's streaming from the repository. So we are not storing the documents for you unless you explicitly ask us to. Otherwise, we'll leverage your repository. You have the documents here, and based on your permissions, you could do things like search for key terms. So let's say I want to find the reference to my vacation policy. I can press vacation. It runs a search on the document. It tells me what page it's on, what are some of the key terms that are around it. So if I know that I'm actually referring to this, part of it here, I click onto it and it jumps to that section of the document. So if, let's say, I get a phone call from whomever and they have a question about their documents or something, I can look up the information that's relevant really quickly. I can run this search to quickly jump to where I am in that document and provide the result and maybe service my constituents or my vendors or whatnot a lot faster by leveraging these tools. And based on my permissions, I can also do things like edit the document, the metadata, or maybe add some annotations on here as well that are just an image overlay on top of the document that could be turned on, turned off, or I could, download or print the document with or without those annotations. So really the whole point here is that we're trying to make the employees more efficient by giving them access to the data that's relevant to them a lot faster without having them spending a lot of time both on the front end doing the capture and indexing or in the back end digging through filing cabinets or folders and libraries in their repository. So really it's all about efficiency and being able to get access to your documents faster so you can service the public as needed. So I'm going to stop here and hand it back over to Gary to finalize it. But like I said, if you have any questions that came up, please, I want to encourage you to use the chat function and ask those questions at your leisure.
Yeah. Thank you, Constantine. That was excellent. Hopefully you're all thinking up some questions for us here. Just a couple quick thoughts to kind of tie back into the theme of things as Constantine was showing it. Where we really see the value delivery that we provide to governments at a variety of levels is really the ability to rework work, right? What we're finding is that we're not only an ability to do work, we're also in certain cases an ability to ensure that work can get done, right? If you think back, most recently to the COVID pandemic that we just lived through, sometimes it's very difficult when people can't be in a room together to accomplish comprehensive tasks, right? And these may be mission critical tasks. We're very adept at being able to throw a synthetic workforce at that to back up on that front. And I think just in general, when I look back on much of what we look to solve for today, right? We're at kind of a crossroads, I think, in the sense that AI is now on the scene in the last 22 months. When I think about the impact ChatGPT alone has had, uh, we're altering our future greatly and in a much more productive way. Um, it's I think the attitudes and the way that we've come at these things haven't necessarily shifted. So a lot of what gets confused as maybe a technology problem, we've been understanding for some time now that it's really a work problem, right? That's been underpinned by technology that was the only way we could manage it, or it was the only tool that we could provide workers with to improve their efficiency. We're moving well beyond that realm now, though. So anyway, with that comment, we would love to engage with you if you're curious about more. If you want to engage us on a much more detailed level, because there's something you're working on, whether it's for the remainder of this fiscal year, or if your fiscal year starts in October, we'd love to come in and would love to create this offer. So I will, Pam, I'll let you discuss that, and then maybe we move on to questions that hopefully the audience may have for us.
Yeah, Gary, thanks. And great job, Constantine, too. I'm always amazed by the demos that you present and how much our platform can do. On the screen, there's a QR code, so please feel free to use it to schedule a free consultation. If you want to discuss more your needs for your agency or your department, please go ahead and fill out the form. I've also attached the form in the attachment section of this webinar, or you can email me directly. My email's on the screen as well, pamela.banky@knowledgelake.com. And as Gary said, please put in your questions that we can answer now. Take this opportunity to ask whatever you'd like, but definitely set up those free consultations. I think you'll really find a lot of value in that. So let me take a quick look here. I see a couple of questions coming in, so I'll start with the first one. And this person asks, how can county governments ensure that the transition to synthetic labor maintains or improves public trust, especially in critical services that require a high level of accuracy and accountability? So here we want to, they're asking about accuracy and accountability specifically. So I don't know, Gary, if you want to start, or Constantine.
Yeah, Pam, I'll lead off, and then Constantine, maybe you'll have a slightly different point of view of it, I think, given our different disciplines and roles. Yeah, so it's an excellent question, and what's interesting is again that we don't look at this as a replacement source of labor. It's actually a second source of labor that more properly or more appropriately realigns cost to the work that's being done, and also frees up human potential to do the things that humans do better. The trust is a communication mechanism in a lot of cases, as we've come to see it over the years. And what I mean by that communication mechanism is it's helping people understand that no, the AI didn't come for their job. I was looking at somebody made a comment the other day, and it's discouraging because they were talking about the fact that AI isn't coming for your job. Agentic AI is coming for your job. And, all that does is it just puts a lot of noise and fear into things. But the reality is that there are loads and loads of jobs that humans did at one time that have been shed over time as our tools, whether technological or farming implements, whatever, manufacturing capabilities. Humans are always evolving the state of the art, which means by its very nature, the way that we're working today is not the way that we'll be working next year, or certainly a decade from now. And think about it in that context. But that trust does need to come from the communication of what the leadership is thinking to use the work for. And from the taxpayer perspective, how do I know my data isn't going to be used in or stolen or used against me, whatever marketing, however, think about your own daily experiences. I don't know about you, but I seem to get weekly letters of from some agency that my data was stolen from an insurance carrier or from a credit card. It's it doesn't excuse it, but at the end of the day, I think in building up that trust, maybe Konstantin, you can talk to what we do on the protection side of things.
Yeah, so there's two things. I mean, for one, part of it is from an accuracy point of view, right? I think it's a great point. It's critical that information is correct. And part of that is part of the platform. We have things in place for validation rules. So those are determined by the business needs themselves, right? So if you say these fields are required and these are not, or these need to be in a certain format, or the values here have to be in this database to make sure that they're correct, right? So there's different things we could put in place to make sure that the information that's being extracted is indeed the information you're looking for. From a security point of view, I feel like there's been a shift over the last couple of years where with as much infrastructure and work has gone into building out, the Microsoft data centers, the cloud environments at this point for processing are probably more secure than, the server room that somebody has in the back of their building, right? Because there's geo redundancies. We're a single tenant environment, so we don't commingle data. We don't even commingle resources. So every one of our clients has their own tenant spun up, and the workers behind it on the back end are spun up and then destroyed as they're no longer needed. So we take security very, very, very seriously, both from securing the information as well as making sure that we are online and running, because we are mission critical for a lot of our clients.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, well said. Thanks. Thank you, Konstantin.
Yep.
Yeah, and please go ahead and continue putting those questions in the chat window. Just want to make sure that we take this time to answer any questions you may have. There is here another one. For counties that may be facing or investigating workforce reductions, what are some immediate steps that local government leaders can take to start leveraging synthetic labor to future-proof their operations?
Yeah, why don't I lead off on that? And again, Konstantin, if you have any thoughts, please dive in. That's an interesting question because, and I'm wondering if it's almost coming from the context of the freezes that we discussed early on. I know a lot of counties are going through rationalization of the work pool, but they're also very sensitive to the fact that they've got work that has to be done. Yeah, I would say if I were taking a look at this right now, I would figure out in a group, maybe in an area maybe where they're thinking about any sort of a reduction in the workforce. I would try to find an area where there's a work process that can be utilized as like a pilot to kind of go through and prove out the point that we do what we say we do, A, and B, that it really meets and exceeds maybe the expectations, both from the agent side of the thing, the agency side of the equation, and then also from maybe even the taxpayer side of the equation, where taxpayers can get a look inside and see what's going on. I'm not sure if it's being asked from the point of view that there are retirements coming up and maybe they're just not backfilling. We have been running into that quite a bit. That is common. So we're being utilized in that case to do the lower level stuff that someone retiring would ordinarily have to do, that we can automate fully. But again, that higher value add stuff that only humans are so good at, I would suggest care in how you evaluate what truly does it mean to you to bring in a synthetic labor source, because you just want to be careful. You've got a lot of really good tribal knowledge of the existing workforce there, and you want to make certain to protect that. Constantine, any thoughts from you on that? Did I overthink it? Which I've been known to do on occasion.
No, you didn't overthink it. I think it actually spurred something on my side that I may have forgotten to mention. And I think part of this you know, workflow portion where you may have folks retiring is there's a lot of knowledge in the way they do things that are just being lost. So really, I think one of the values that we're able to provide is that any rule set in terms of how you store documents, how you name documents, how they need to be processed, all of that um, is part of what the workflow handles in the back end. So as you get either new workers, or maybe you're just moving the work around, or it's being offloaded completely, um, you know, we handle the back end to make sure that those same rules and policies still apply. So no matter who's doing the work or looking for these documents after the fact, we don't need to worry about, well, how did Gary store them versus Pam, or how do they process these? All those rules get stored in the back end. So as you are going through either turnover or reduction in labor workforce, those rules can live on because those are now become policies that have been adhered to as documents. The data flows through the organization.
Yeah.
Great. Let's see. See, another question popped in here, and folks, don't be shy. Come on, put in more questions. This one is kind of related to some of the answers that you guys gave already, but let's take it. How can synthetic labor be effectively integrated into county operations without disrupting existing workflows, particularly for departments relying on experienced staffing that's nearing retirement?
That's interesting. Yeah. That's, and a lot of county questions, which is good. We've got a lot of counties out there thinking about things, and maybe some of it's year-end ARPA money that it's a use it or lose it. Maybe that's driving some of this, which is interesting. But yeah, I think as a retirement protection, again, I look at what we do in the realm of synthetic labor, and I think that I see it shape up as two things, right? It's two labor sources that do two different things in some ways, right? One is more of the kind of the baseline grunt work that gets really tiring and is mistake prone and just consumes a ton of time. But it's also the protection around that, right? So that work, as I'd mentioned, during COVID, we had a number of clients that needed to ensure operations were up. And it was very difficult to do certain things when humans weren't available to work as a team to do that in the beginning stages. And that was turned over to synthetic labor. I think, you certainly can use it as a protection by codifying maybe some of that tribal knowledge through the workflow that those seasoned veterans they have an understanding of how things get done and the importance of the way that they're being managed. You can certainly codify that in the form of a synthetic worker, right? It's almost like you're building something that's it's the best representation of how that work can be done. And you can amalgamate it through if you've got a series of people retiring in similar time frames where you're transitioning some of their work out, that also, when I think about it, reworks how you would rehire or backfill hire in that type of a situation, because a lot of the work that maybe had to be done before that was manual, if you've hived it off to a synthetic worker, you can create a different hiring profile. And the reason I'm thinking down this path is I met an individual yesterday at this major state event that I was at, and part of his role was just in that, right? It was determining the roles they were hiring for, and it makes an interesting question. Can you change the role significantly enough that it takes away the stuff most people don't like to do anyway and make it that much more of an appealing place to go? First of all, and more importantly, does it realign at a deeper value stream what the individual is being paid and the work they're doing being that higher order stuff? And I would think the answer there should be yes. Constantine, any thoughts on that?
No, I think you covered that pretty well. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Let me take a look again, see if there's any other questions. In the meantime, still on the screen is that QR code and ways to reach out for a free consultation. Please take advantage of that. Don't see any other questions coming through at this moment. So I just want to thank everyone for attending. I want to thank Gary and Constantine for a great presentation. I also want to remind our viewers that on October 15th, we will have another great webinar with an exciting presenter who is an agentic AI expert, Pascal Bornet. It'll definitely be a lively, worthwhile conversation. We'll hear from him and from Russ Malls, our VP of Sales, talking about synthetic labor, a little bit more on that, and agentic AI. So please stay tuned, register for that webinar as well, and reach out with any questions, and we will see you all soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.